Good to go. Everybody, welcome. X's and Knowles presented by Knowles 24/7. We are back. It was my fault. Had to take a week off. I was traveling for work and I let the team down. However, this team will never, ever let you down. I'm here with my two guys, my two friends, the smartest football people I know, Kevin Little, Adam Brown. Guys, how you doing? I'm glad to be back.
Back and healthy, maybe
Yeah.
partially.
Dude, I don't know. Yeah, it's been crud season around these parts too. Kev, how you doing, man? You avoided the crud?
I've been in and out of it, I think we've made it out alive.
Good stuff, dude. Well, I think you guys both look like $1,000,000, and hopefully something that looks like $1,000,000 is Florida State's offense here in 2025. Guys, I know we feel like we're in the doldrums, the middle of that dreaded, really, really, really boring part of the offseason. You're not 100% wrong, but spring football is right around the corner, mere weeks away, and we are excited. There's a lot of new to Florida State's offense and defense, dude, the entire team. Like everything's there's a lot of new and intriguing in the 2025 Florida State Seminoles. We've talked a lot on the offensive side of the ball. We talked specifically a lot about Herb Hand and Gus Malzahn on the run game. We expect it to be a big component. It needs to be after all the running they didn't do last year in 2024. But today, mainly due to Kev's protestations, we're going to talk about the passing game. We're going to analyze the kind of unique skill positions in this Gus Malzahn offense, what they've done in the past, primarily the receivers. We're going to talk about the big 9 receiver. We're going to talk about slot wide receivers. Then we're going to be talking about that kind of like hybrid tailback position, that like jet sweep running back-ish, but also a threat out of the backfield guy. We're going to be analyzing who Gus has used in the past to fulfill those roles, the kind of production that they had at UCF. And then looking forward, we're going to talk about the dudes that are on Florida State's roster in the spring and even after the spring that can potentially fill those roles, what they do similar to Gus has had in the past, and however, what their differences might lead them to do in the future. So you're going to get some analysis. You're going to get some future projection. And you're going to get a whole lot of fun. So I don't know what more you can ask for, but don't be greedy because you're not getting anything else. Let's go. Kev, what position are we going to talk about first?
Yeah, I guess we'll go from the outside end. So this is kind of the outside receiver, the taller guy, the Duce Robinson role, as I think you could imagine it next season.
Who did UCF have filling this role? And I do like your table cutlery approach of working out to in. I think that's very classy. I'm not surprised from a gentleman like you. Who's this guy we're watching here for UCF?
So his name's Jacoby Jones. He's at the bottom of the screen here. You can see kind of a theme with kind of all of their receivers. Malzahn like to kind of have these kind of tight formations, spread out a receiver wide, get them isolated one-on-one with a corner, and this is his longest play from scrimmage. You can see they're just trying to get him in space. Here's another clip. He's super wide splits. He gets lost by the defense. Easy touchdown.
So, Adam, what do you see when you see kind of the routes that we've seen? We saw that hitch, and he makes a guy miss. You see like a shot play. I mean, is this Duce Robinson role? Spoiler alert: who we think is going to fill this role for Florida State? Is this Duce Robinson role? Is it going to be asked to do a lot of like different complex routes, or is it just like, hey, dude, you're athletic and big, be athletic and big?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of fits the Johnny Wilson, Duce Robinson type of big frame, be a big target, be a big playmaker. You know, let's get you the ball in these tight windows and let you use your big frame to make athletic plays. I think it makes a lot of sense. You saw the slant there a second ago, the glance route. Some stuff we've seen, you know, they ran Johnny on those posts quite a bit off the RPO. We've seen them do it with Kentron. I'm trying to think of all the other dudes that Mike's done it with, but yeah, it makes sense that he would fit in that spot. And I think a lot of people, when they think of like this 9 position, and if you've been on Knowles 24/7, you've seen Dane use that lingo and Brendan use that lingo quite a bit. That's what it's labeled in the Norvell Gus Malzahn playbook. You know, you would often think of that player being a guy who just lines up into the boundary all the time or lines up out wide on the ball, and that's the way they use them. But they find ways to kind of move that position around. They'll play it, in like a slot position. You could kind of see it here. If you would think that the guy on the bottom of the screen that's on the ball was the 9 receiver, it's not in this position, but in some formations it would be. In the middle of trips,
here he is. Slot.
Yeah, they're gonna move it around and use it a lot in a variety of ways and try to find a good matchup with that player.
But here he is at the top of the screen.
Yep.
And Kev, I think people would be surprised that they could. Oh well, Duce Robinson. Like if they're gonna, Malzahn puts this position in the slot. Is that going to be a fit for him? He played out of the slot a lot at USC, right?
Yeah, I mean it's a matchup based offense, right? You can see none of these routes are that crazy. He's run hitches, he's run goes,
slants.
He's run slants, right? This isn't really a a West Coast based offense. They're not trying to nickel and dime you with these, 3-level reads or whatever. They're trying, notice they're trying to get their guys isolated. It's trying to do one-on-one routes. They're trying to get their guys in space and leverage that space with routes. They're trying to make life easy on the quarterback. He's not having to make complicated reads. He can take one step and trust that his big body receiver is going to get inside leverage. And so it's a passing game that works if you're effective running the football, right?
Right.
You notice why this works is because there's only one safety over the top. They're worried that this quarterback could take off. They're worried about this screen up here. There's no help on this side of the field because they've been effective running screens and running the football.
So you're going to use run games and formations to get one-on-one matchups, and that's how they're going to try to create separation. In addition to athleticism, it looks like, right?
Yeah, and I think when we see the other positions, what's going to actually be surprising is that they're not that different because what they're doing is they're hunting for matchups.
Mm-hmm.
So, right, this is their 9, their big-bodied receiver. Notice how often he's one-on-one out here on the weak side of formations. We're going to see that with the other position as well.
Does it feel like, Adam, when you watch like this Malzahn offense and the Norvell offenses of the past, that his philosophy is to call plays? If you guys ever played Madden, there's different ways you can play. Call by formation, ask Madden, or by player. It feels like a lot of the plays are by player, right? It's like I got to get this guy the ball, and there's a play designed for him. And now it's like I got to get Jaheim Bell the ball. This is a play designed for him. Now it's Wilson's turn. Like, does it feel that way to you, or am I reading a little bit too much into it?
I think there's some of that too. I definitely think that they are of the philosophy that it is players, not plays. Meaning they want to find a way to get their playmakers the ball. I mean, I know Mike's talked about it.
He talked about it with us when he did all that matchup based stuff.
Yeah, I mean, they want to do their film study. They want to understand what you're going to try to do, and then they want to put their players in position to get the matchups against those looks that you're going to provide them. So I don't expect that stuff to change very much. The only thing I do kind of expect to change is, and we've seen like more rotation offensively, is less with Gus. Like I think you're going to see these are the guys that are going to play, these are guys that are going to get the ball, and we're going to go really fast. And maybe not worry about the matchups as much, but we're going to create matchups with our tempo.
Understood. That's how you're going to use them to keep them off balance, which would be a nice change of pace, man. Good formations, but just it didn't feel like we ever, especially last year, they ever got to kick it into high gear. And even when Florida State was more effective with Jordan Travis, it was like a methodical effectiveness. A lot of checks, a lot of this at the line, and Jordan had command of the offense where it still worked, but you never put the foot on the gas really ever that I can recall, except for sparingly a couple times. Now we talked about Duce Robinson fulfilling this role. Is it Duce or bust, or who's some other guys that could be a factor on the outside for Florida State in 2025?
No, I think it's Duce. I think it wouldn't shock me to see maybe like a Hakeem Williams.
Yeah, that's got to be number
2.
That's got to be the second guy, right? That when you imagine that.
Yeah, there, or maybe he's like what is it, like the 5 or the 2? I can't.
What do you think, Kev?
The split end.
I mean, to me, the simple route tree, the idea of getting the ball in their hands early, like that fits with a Hakeem. That looks like a Hakeem to me. Get get him a screen, get him
Yeah.
these hitches, get him a slant. Just you're trying to get him isolated. You're trying to get him one-on-one with a wide receiver and with a corner in space. And hopefully Hakeem's taking that step where his routes are a little bit cleaner. He's making some of these catches, and he's allowing his athleticism to get yards after the catch.
They're both going to be pluses in the run game. So perimeter blocking is not going to be an issue for Duce or Hakeem. I'm with you based on the clips that we saw from this offense. They're not asking him to do anything complicated. It's just like, just be a big, strong athlete, which is not a given with Hakeem Williams. There's been some, at least not in the blocking game, but when the ball is in the air, I think a consistent theme is that you've wanted to see the physicality come out. And maybe that's something that comes with confidence. Maybe it's something that's been derailed by injuries, but that's somewhere where he's going to have to step up with the ball in the air, because a lot of these are going to be one-on-one contested catches, one-on-one matchups. Going to have to come down with the ball, right, Adam? Strong
they
hands.
brought in a couple of dudes that are big, physical wide receivers in the signing class outside of just
Go ahead. Yeah, that's a very good point.
Jeez, you're going to ask me to name them. I can't remember all their flipping names.
Tayshawn Gelsey, they brought him in. Tariq Mallory, I think, is the kid from West Virginia. I can't think of anybody else. Now, what about
they brought in a handful of dudes that are, legitimate towers of wide receivers. So, you got to think they're going to throw some bodies at that, and it probably makes you believe that Duce Robinson's going to move around a little bit and maybe not just play like the 9 wide receiver. Maybe they look to him at playing more like the would be like the Z or I think it's the 5 in Mike's offense. Let him do some movement stuff, or even play some slot.
Now, what about that really talented kid? Is he from Maryland? Elijah Moore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What about him? Could he be a factor? Could he be a factor at all this season? Super talented guy, obviously.
Yeah, if he's got his head on straight, and
there were some issues with learning the offense before.
Yep.
Now at least he's on a level playing field with everybody else learning a newish offense. That's a kid that could help you out from a physical standpoint. I would imagine.
Yeah, I just they've gone so far away from it almost feels like they are going to go with 2 big physical towers on the outside, and then go with a quick Squirrel White, a quick Micahi Danzy, or Jaylin Lucas, and some Randy Pittman and Landon Thomas out there. It just doesn't feel like they're built to have that. Okay, on one side we're gonna have that 6'5" guy, the other side we're gonna have that 6 foot 6'1" type guy, and we're gonna have our smaller slot. They brought in some really big freaking wide receivers.
Yeah,
it was a plan to
see how they deploy all of them.
It's kind of like a San Antonio Spurs twin tower type deal, absolutely. Right? Yeah, understood. Kev, you kind of agree with that assessment?
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting because when I was weeding through UCF, they really didn't have a lot of tall receivers. The Jones kid is 6'3", and he stands out on that roster, and so it is a little different than the personnel that Malzahn was working with at UCF. And so I guess the question is, was that because of a recruiting limitation at UCF? Was that because of him kind of melding with Norvell's philosophy? To me, it makes sense. If you want to be a run first team, get big wide receivers, right? Mm-hmm. Leverage the screen game as much as you can, have these big bodies that can push defensive backs around, have these big guys that you can move up and block safeties effectively with, have big bodies that you can throw jump balls to. It makes sense to me to have the bigger bodies, but that's not what they were working at UCF. And so it'll be a little curious to see how they use those. Like AB was saying, are they going to put 2 or 3 of these guys on the field at the same time? Are we going to see more like UCF, who tended to have a few more smaller guys on the field?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it'll be interesting because it'll give you a glimpse into what did Malzahn have to do out of necessity out of UCF, and he did get some good athletes, but at a different level. And what does he ideally want to do? What's it going to look like? That's a question that I think will be answered this spring, and that's something that you guys should watch for as you read the news reports on Noles247.com, whatever video we get. Now you get to see what Gus wants to do with a higher caliber of athlete, and I think it's going to be very interesting. Let's move on to the next position. Kev, you want to talk about the slot guys in the Malzahn offense?
Yeah, so this traditionally at UCF has been their number one receiver. Kind of this guy that's sitting 5'10", 6'1", a speedster, a guy that can really take the top off the defense with just track speed. So Kobe Hudson was the guy. He was their leading receiver last year. And you can see right off the bat, his biggest play last year was him just racing a guy downfield.
Looks a lot like Squirrel White's junior year at Tennessee, right? Or sophomore year, whatever, second year at Tennessee.
Yeah, it does. I mean, this in particular, right? Get him in space, get him one-on-one. Again, you see the guys they're trying to target, they're putting out here one-on-one. Like, this is a different position. This is a different wide receiver position, but you still see a lot of these plays. They're trying to get them ISO'd one-on-one on the side of the field.
Like what you said last time, it works because all that attention's on the running game.
I mean, look at this.
Look at all the focus on the running game from that first. Yeah, the first play, like that's why you get these one-on-ones over and over and over again.
Yeah, I mean, there's literally no safety. He has no help, and it's because this is Sam Houston, but they're respecting the run game. It's what UCF wants to do. You're trying to open things up for the wide receiver.
Right. That's Sam Houston or NC State. That's an impossible position for like a cornerback. That's really tough, man.
But this is a higher level competition. TCU, again, you're looking for a guy that's just gonna use his speed. So again, you're hunting for matchups. He's one-on-one on the weak side of the formation, but for whatever reason, UCF felt like having him on this weak side for TCU was a better matchup for them than having Jacoby Jones, right? So now you're seeing similar route tree, similar ideas, similar concepts, but we're just changing who we're going to get one-on-one with this corner. Maybe this corner's a little bit lengthier, but has worse top end speed. So we're going to use the faster guy on him.
Adam, do you expect the kind of production splits to be the same at FSU for 25, where this role, even though it's not the big outside number one typical wide receiver, but maybe this is the role that actually gets most of the production next year? Or do you think that that's going to be different for FSU? Just like Kev said it was for UCF, you think it's going to be different for FSU?
I think it's a tough question to answer right now, right? I mean,
we haven't seen anybody, and we don't know how.
Right.
How healthy everybody is, right?
Right. I mean, I think that they're going to look to get the ball all over the place, but I think that it's going to start with the running game, which Kev was just talking about, like how you're creating a matchup to get no safety help in the middle of the field, or one safety help we pointed out earlier. I think a good bit of it is going to come down to like what chemistry can Castellanos develop with these different guys that he's never thrown the ball to.
Yeah, I agree.
If he develops the chemistry with Duce Robinson, I expect the ball to go to Duce Robinson. If he develops one with Squirrel White, then I expect the ball to go to Squirrel White. Like, I think they're going to try to find that and then build off of that. You're building an offense, pretty much an entirely new offense in an off season. So you're going to have to find that chemistry really quick, and you're going to have to find who Thomas is comfortable going to, and then you're going to have to find ways to build around that.
Another layer two to this, and if you guys remember, even when the Norvell offenses have been clicking at Florida State, and when they've had legitimate NFL high round picks like Keon Colbin, it was kind of like a carousel depending on which opponent they played, who would have the big breakout game. Remember? Oh, this is a Keon game. This is a Johnny game. This is like this is a Trey Benson game. Yeah. Keon beat the dog piss out of LSU, and then it was like, where was he for the next 3 or 4?
I just keep looking at these dudes, and I keep just seeing like Hakeem Williams type body types running around, like not quite as big, not the same size, but
for UCF, you mean?
Yeah. It just looked like guys. Like, I just keep seeing Hakeem like running around out there, like a guy that that can be physical enough and explosive enough to run a slant, run away from you, but body you on his backside, get deep on the post. Like, I don't see Squirrel White running a lot of slants. Just doesn't make sense in my head, based on his body type, that it's a route he's going to run a ton.
Yeah,
so,
I think
good point. That's interesting.
I mean, it's less that that's what they want to do, and more that, like, that's what they want Squirrel White for, and more that they love this RPO. Like, they run this kind of deep glance, third level RPO, reading this safety on the backside. They run it all the time.
With this position, Kev, with this position that we just highlighted?
Well, they'll run it to either side, but yeah, that's what I'm trying to say, is that based off my watching of UCF, the wide receiver positions are pretty interchangeable.
Yeah,
I think that, like, we saw both this guy and Jones, their two top receivers, in this position running this exact RPO, because this is the play they run. This is what they want to live off. This is what they want to do, and they're not afraid to say, okay, today's matchup against Cincinnati, we've got a better matchup with him, so we're going to put him in this position. And I think that's just kind of how they're going to do it. I think that these wide receiver positions are a little bit more fluid than
the numbers that they're labeled with.
Right.
Understood. It's not so much like separation, this guy does this, separation, this guy does this. So based off of that, based on what both you guys are saying, because I agree from watching the film, it's assumed right now, it's like, all right, the number one outside guy is Duce Robinson. The number one slot guy is Squirrel White, and they'll be like similar production. Not necessarily the case. Who are in order of how they fit what this offense wants to do, who are the top wide receivers that do what it looks like Gus wants to do? Like, order them.
I think Duce Robinson's the top of the list. I mean, I think he's top of the food chain because he can play vertically, which we know they want to do. He's physical and big enough to run some of these slant routes and win. Excuse me. Like, he makes the most sense for what you're seeing, what Mike's been and what Gus has been. Like, there's a clear fit there.
Sure.
And then I think Squirrel's probably the second one. Like, that speed's going to translate. Like, they're going to get him on over routes. They're going to get him on posts. They're going to get him on deep crossers.
Even with what you said, that like the in-breaking slant routes aren't necessarily his forte from
I just don't think
standpoint. You still think he's the number two?
Yeah, I think that's not something I necessarily think they're going to use him on. Maybe they will. Maybe they'll shock me. But, I think he can run a glance route out of the slot on some of this RPO stuff, and I think we'll probably see some of that. I think that they are going to want to get him on crossing routes, deep crossing routes. I think they're going to want to try to get him over the top against some of these one high safety looks that they're going to end up seeing. Like, they're going to utilize that speed, is my point. Gus wants to throw the ball deep. That's a guy that can get deep, and they're going to throw it to him. It just makes too much sense, especially when you look at it from the standpoint of Duce Robinson has some proven production at the D1 level. So Squirrel White. Where else is it coming from? Like, I mean, at some point, those are two dudes that have proven it. You're gonna get them the football. You're gonna find ways to. You have also probably invested quite a bit of money in them.
That's another factor. You went after them both pretty aggressively, right?
Yeah.
You're going to use them. You need to use them, especially when you emphasize production. So that's a good point. So even though they're interchangeable, the two guys that they went to go get to add to this roster, we still expect them to be the most productive guys. Health, all that stuff.
The how is probably up in the air. Some for Squirrel. I don't think it is for Duce. Like, I think Duce is pretty clearly defined. Like, go routes, slant routes,
screens,
some post routes, screen every once in a while. Like, I think his role is pretty clearly defined. Squirrel's is a little foggier for me, because how does Gus try to get him the ball quicker so that he can use some of that shiftiness and his ability in the open field. And then after that, like, I think you start really a guy we haven't mentioned yet, Javon Boggs, who's a true freshman coming in.
Very polished though, very highly
extremely
productive.
polished. Yeah,
Very
and super productive in high school. Like that, it wouldn't shock me, and I'm not like saying this is not some like insider info or anything. Like, it wouldn't shock me if by like year's end we're talking about him as like your number 4, that type, like a guy that just really kind of came on and supplanted himself as a player for you in this offense.
Kind of like the second coming of Micah Pittman types, like
Yeah,
very productive, highly polished, technical route runner, great hands.
Here's why. We're showing all these slant routes and that stuff. Like that, those are routes that kid's going to flourish at. He's really savvy, a really good route runner. He's also physical enough to get a guy on his back hip. Like those are routes he's going to succeed on, in my opinion.
Yeah, and there's something too, and you especially saw it last year with like the transfer portal haul of receivers that they got, like banking on attributes and speed and potential and projection. There's a natural ability to like feel open space and get to open space, and the art of being a receiver that is such an underrated skill. And like teams like Bill Belichick on the Patriots leveraged dudes that could do that in the slot for his whole career and totally got him undervalued.
Yep.
So yeah, that's an interesting name, Kev. Any others that you'd like to add that could be like dark horses for production for one of these two receiver roles?
Yeah, not necessarily, but I do have an interesting question about like the Duce Robinson role, where he fits in. Because I think we agree, like the natural places, those hitches, those goes, kind of, DK Metcalf him, were simple route tree and just leverage his physicality. But with Johnny, we saw a lot of those little flex sets where he essentially, I mean, this is a different round entirely, but he essentially played a wide receiver that was, kind of double spaced outside, kind of this flex receiver tight end role where he could block up on an outside zone, or he was kind of in a good position to release downfield without having to navigate through the box. I'd be curious to see if they do something like that with Duce, where they use him. Like Johnny was never really used as a tight end, but they did leverage his size in the run game a fair amount.
Yeah, big time.
In that flex position.
Oh, he had great angles. You're absolutely right, Kev. He had great angles on the run game. You could do play action off of that, where he's looking like he's doing like he's showing block and then like running up the seam at the last minute. There's a lot of potential there, right, Adam?
And Johnny was special in that regard. I mean, the Eagles basically played him as a second tight end all year long. Like when he was healthy and available for them, they would bring him in motion and send him up through B gap. Like they used him. So I think Johnny's a unicorn in that regard. But Duce has shown a willingness and the ability to block. I don't know if to the same level as Johnny, but it makes sense that I don't know though. But God, like just looking at Gus, like he's going way more like spread stuff.
Yeah,
based on what we looked at last year.
Yeah, and Mike's like the king of the nub, right? Like he kind of likes stuff close to the. It'd be interesting how far away are the dudes?
Run so much counter and stuff like that. Like Gus is not going to run counter. They were going to run a few snaps.
Oh, that's going to be interesting.
Going to run inside zone. Like it's going to be inside zone.
That'll be interesting. I can't wait to see, like, looking at the run play type, like calls, like the percentage of each from just year over to year. It should be a pretty drastic change, but that's something for another video. We'll get to that. They've got pieces, how they will be deployed, how much of the vestiges of like what Norvell's done at Florida State are going to continue to get carried forth by Gus. We don't know yet. We could have seen a little bit of that during a spring game, but such is life. I don't know. We'll see it during spring football. Let's talk about the last position tonight. And Kev, what do we call this position? I think it was noticed. It's like a tailback or what
the tailback. It's kind of where Lawrence Toafili played for FSU. It's a guy that will play running back, will line up at wide receiver. He's kind of a Swiss Army knife guy. UCS version, his name was Johnny Richardson. He looks like Jaylin Lucas out there. This is I think Jaylin Lucas is the most natural slot into this guy. Again, these are highlights of at first all of his top runs and then all of his top passing plays, but basically you'll see a trend
Of like what they asked him to do. We don't want to give it away.
of what was this guy's role?
And Lucas was, man, he was starting to come on for FSU before like the injury and stuff. He looked good. And Adam, you called that.
I did. I won't accept any credit for that.
Well, I mean, he didn't actually end up doing it because he got
I
hurt, but
know.
he could.
We had that whole argument about touches, and then he got hurt, and they decided not to give him any touches for whatever reason.
So there he is lining up as traditional running back.
Yeah, so at the end of the New Hampshire game, he kind of got some run at running back. That they did throw him in a fair amount. He was more of a running back than a wide receiver.
I'm seeing a lot of.
So interesting news. Micahi Danzy just got moved to wide receiver, and Brendan Zach broke that on the Knowles 24/7 website, and Brendan wrote a good article about like how he kind of envisions, and I think it's some intel based stuff like how they plan to use like a Danzy and a Lucas, and a lot of it really kind of revolves around like this jet action stuff, the jet motion and how they build off of that. So I mean, I would really, I think it's good and worth everybody's time to go kind of check that out on the website. But I mean, you see it here, like just imagine Micahi Danzy, who's really, really an elite track runner, running a play like this, or Jaylin Lucas, running a play like this. Like it starts to set up a lot of other stuff.
Wade dudes, like guys for that position with plus ball skills and plus hands, like they're weapons, man. Like that this position could really put a stress on an opposing defensive coordinator, right, Kev? Because they can attack you with a lot of different ways.
I mean, just look at this. They've run kind of this counter action a lot of the times when they're running this jet action. But I mean, you're getting the attention of these two guys, right? They're setting this up to potentially be a quarterback counter back the other way. And you can imagine if these guys start flowing this way, I mean, you've got extra blockers. You've got enough guys for a touchdown. I
think Brendan had put in that article too that UCF under Gus was fourth in runs with motions involved. So
I mean, just look at this.
That is a drastic shift from what Florida State's been.
And it's something that we've called for a while, right?
Yep.
And I'm watching that play, and I'm not even watching Richardson. I just wish that the quarterback would have kept the ball and ran it for 50 yards,
Yeah, it's just it's a fun position. I think it's a guy that they're going to use for their particular skill set. So like, I think Johnny Richardson looks more like a Jaylin Lucas, who's going to be more of a tailback who spends more of his time at running back, but. You can see where Micahi Danzy might be a guy that gets those jet sweeps, but also runs some of the RPOs and runs more of the downfield stuff because he has a better ability to catch the ball. So I do think this position molds and changes to whoever's running it. And here it just so happens to look like Johnny Richardson, who was more of a running back than a wide receiver. So that's kind of how they leverage the hybrid position. You can see most of his receptions here are out of the backfield.
Any other things that we think that Gus and Mike will do with this position, because Jaylin Lucas and Micahi Danzy are different level athletes than this kid we're watching right here, Adam. Anything that we didn't see in the film that you think could be a possibility that they will do next season based on the personnel that they have?
Yeah, I mean, you start talking about like reverses and end arounds, like those kinds of things make sense. Like if you go into a game and you're sitting there watching a game, I'm just talking to the fans here, to our listeners. If you're sitting down and you're watching a football game next fall, and you come out and you see Micahi Danzy lined up, I don't know, one by one off of the offensive tackle or off of a tight end or whatever, like watch him, because there's a decent chance he's probably going to get like an end around or a reverse or something, some sort of play where he's going to end up getting the ball, because it just makes too much sense. Like this is an explosive athlete who
elite athlete.
I don't think he fits in I think it's a good move for him because I don't think he fits in this inside zone running scheme. I think he's a guy you got to try to get the ball to and not ask him to have to like really read a whole lot. Um, so it makes a lot of sense for this move. But like, yeah, you go out there, he gets a reverse or two a game, or he gets an end around and a reverse, or he gets you put him out wide and you throw the ball to him hot on some of that triple option stuff. Like, it just makes too much sense to find ways to get him 2 or 3 touches a game just to use his elite speed. And Jaylin Lucas is the same way. Like, you get these guys a touch on Jet or 2 touches on Jet a game, and you're just using them as a decoy over and over and over and over again, making defenses respect their ability and their speed throughout the course of a game. And then look for them when they're lined up funky, and you look at them and like, why is he lined up behind the offensive tackle? Like, that doesn't make sense. Well, it's probably because they're going to do something fun with him.
Right.
So,
or at least use the eye candy, stress the linebackers. Then you got Squirrel running by your safety who is focused on Micahi, Danzy, and
start
Jaylin Lucas.
making a defense have to think about things. It's almost like, can't believe we've been this long since we've done this.
It's been a while since both sides of the football at Florida State University have caused hesitation in the people that they're playing against. We've been really... It's been honest on both sides of the ball. It's like, we're going to do this, and we like to run counter, and we like to run this defense with this coverage, and we're just going to try to execute it the best we can. And Florida State's been kind of an easy scout. Hopefully this kind of changes that, right? And it's something that we've been talking about for years, even when they were good. Like around that NC State game 2022, we were starting to get a little bit worried about the offense being an easy scout. Now, of course, they Jordan Travis their way out of a lot of these problems, but it would be nice to getting back to, when you watch a Florida State game and our linebackers look like they're playing the game very slow and there's a lot of computations going on. And it's
Think
like
about that Georgia Tech game.
Dude, John Nash, like a beautiful head, like equations, like floating around over like in the ether. Let's do that to somebody else's linebackers. Let's let them look like they have a slow processing unit. What do you think, Kev?
Yeah, I mean, the numbers follow Gus Malzahn. Well, the advanced analytics tend to like his offenses, especially compared to their recruiting rankings. I think they do a good job of maximizing their talent. And I think when you could get a good quarterback in there to run his offense, it takes off, and it tends to be one of the best in the country. So I think there's going to be a stability. I think there's going to be a sense that there's a game plan that challenges defenses week in, week out. You might not get the best result every week. It might be frustrating. I know. I've listened to Auburn fans. I listen to UCF fans. I know. Just like watching Mike Norvell, sometimes it's going to feel frustrating. Sometimes these run-first offenses are going to feel frustrating. Sometimes you're going to watch that jet sweep go for 2 yards 10 times in a game, and then you're not going to notice when the fake jet sweep breaks the quarterback counter for 40 yards. But like, there's going to be a plan. They're going to challenge things. They're going to week in, week out, at least get some points on the board, and try to maximize kind of what they're building here. And I'm thinking that there's at least going to be, I think we're going to very quickly forget how historically bad that offense was last year.
You're eliminating the possibility of the complete meltdown disaster, but the ceiling is what the ceiling is. So we'll see. And like you said, a lot of it depends on the quality of the play that they're going to get from the quarterback. That's what really can level up this offense. But even with what we know that they have, even with what we've seen, it's going to be at a minimum a return to competency. How much over that can this offense go? That's a topic. That's a topic for another video. But guess what? We're going to be back here all the time, so we're going to cover it eventually. Guys, we love you. Thank you for your time. Anything else our boys want to add? Adam, I know you're disgusted. This was way too much talking about guys that were so far outside of the ball. I can see you're just green with nausea.
No, I'm just ready for spring to get here. Like, I'm ready to
Me
be able to have a conversation about this football team and how it's all starting to come together, even though we're not going to get a spring game this year. And hopefully, coverage and all that stuff is the same. Like, it'll be nice to, I feel like spring's going to be our first opportunity as a group. And I include everybody, like as a fan base and as a family here, like to put last season behind us and start moving forward and start finding that kind of positivity again for what hopefully will be a successful 2025.
Catharsis, optimism. It's a therapy session again, but it's time to start off anew. And guess what? Keep chopping. We'll see you here next time, guys. Keep chopping. Love you.